I am recording this. Your faces will be visible, your voices, all your wisdom, and anything else that might happen to pop out of your mouth will also be recorded, and will be available to the public. If anybody has a problem with that, please raise your hand. Oh, all right, all right. In that case, we are recording, and if somebody comes in, I'd sure appreciate it if you guys would remind me to restate that, make sure that we're covered on that. Okay. All right. We spent, and for those of you who are new to this, I want to tell you that the last 4 sessions, as I said, we've been recording, and we've actually got about 20 of them now posted on the AAPG website, and there's all sorts of stuff there. But the last 4 I really count as some of the most important, and it has to do with dealing with families. When you deal with families, it really, really adds to your success rates. And when you deal correctly and keep them involved, keep them moving, and do the right things and everything. So if you are new, I want to encourage you to go back when you have time and go through those other 4 things we just finished doing. All right. Anybody got anything new, any issues that we need to talk about before we get into this? Some pressing situation you want to talk about? Okay. All right. Well, in that case, Heidi had mentioned, and I thought it was a good idea, that we might want to take and start dealing with some of the ethical dilemma things that can come up. An ethical dilemma is when you have to make some decisions on, and the law comes into it, the rules of ethics come into it, and the good of the client comes into it, and the philosophy of the program and how things run. And you will have them, and it's important that we take a look at it and you start to exercise some thought and planning and movement around this issue. It is really important. I have run programs this year it'll be 45 years, and some of them have been very, 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 very large with thousands of clients, and they were all APG oriented. I am graced by God to be able to tell you that there has never been a single lawsuit in all of that time. There was one investigation for fraud, which was shown to be there wasn't any, and it came out of a political situation. And not only was it shown not to be, but it was successfully proven that absolutely there was none, and it was because of some things we did in the process that basically covered our backsides, that made it clear what we're doing and why, etc. Never a lawsuit in all of that time, and never a filing with any state agency, a complaint with any state. Take that back. There was one filing with a state agency. A client claimed that one of the facilitators did something, and in fact, nothing ever came out of that either. But that's in 45 years, and I mean 11 cities in the United States, 3 in Canada, multiple places in all of those. So these things are real important. You will be really happy you did it. One of the other things that I wanted to put into it before we began with looking at some of these scenarios is do some things to protect yourself and protect the elements that are helping you. Make sure you have some malpractice insurance, because I could have had a different story to tell you. I could have said that there were lots of issues, and some counselor did something I wasn't aware of, and it came back on me. I know people that have had that happen. That's what malpractice insurance and professional liability insurance are for. So make sure you do those kinds of things, or make sure your company has that in place. So given that, my opinion is that ethical dilemma dealing correctly with ethics and the laws and everything. It's a matter of acquiring habits of thinking and approach. and how you think about things, what you're aware of in the laws and the rules, and how you approach and some things you build into the program to help you deal with some things. Most recently, a situation came up where there were clients in the program here who were talking about situations where doctors were suggesting Adderall and a lot of different issues going on. And one of the facilitators knew about some health things to help with ADD, ADHD, and was going through and is still going through, should I say anything? And I say health things, I mean naturalistic kind of things. And we're going to have a discussion about that before anything is said, or anything of note is said, because that's how we handle these things. It's about the process. Any kind of thing like that comes up, we're going to discuss it before anything is said, usually. And when it steps away from that, that's when we have to kind of tighten stuff up. So it's a process you want endemic to your organization. With that, any other comments before we get into it? Heidi or Hannah, y'all want to say anything as we get into this? No? Okie doke. All right. Well, let's Heidi, if you'll scroll down some on this, let's get down into one of these scenarios. Do a little introduction of where these scenarios came from, please.
Tiana, do you want to jump in?
So the scenarios came from working through creating tools for coaching and training of APG facilitators. We have found these, like the role play or case study scenarios, to be a really effective tool with the youth peer supporters that I supervise. So we thought that this might also be something beneficial to try to create a template for other APGs in New Hampshire, to try to capture some of the things that I wish that we had talked through before sending youth peer supporters out into the world to do their job. But this is like a very limited scope of those things. It's just a few. There are many others that could and probably should be added. And I guess that's why Heidi thought that we should bring it to this group, because I'm sure other people have had experiences that we could draw from to create more scenarios.
Great. You want to read the first one out loud to us? I know we can all read, but it's just kind of the way you do stuff.
Yeah. So scenario one, you're a group facilitator for an APG in Nashua. And through the APG, you have been working with a 16-year-old participant named Adam, who has been attending your group for about 5 months now, and have noticed that you don't share the same political views or opinions. But so far, this has not gotten in the way of your ability to work with Adam. During one of your APG meetings, Adam brings up the Black Lives Matter movement and asks you what your opinion is, after telling you that he feels strongly that all lives matter, and he doesn't understand why he received some negative feedback when he posted that opinion on his social media. Adam seems genuinely interested in understanding why what he said about all lives mattering could have provoked negative responses from people, because he feels that the statement all lives matter is more inclusive than Black Lives Matter. In your role as the APG group facilitator, how would you navigate this conversation and respond to Adam in a way that would help him to see things from an alternative perspective, and also allow for all group members to feel safe expressing their perspectives on the topic?
Interesting. All right, well, here's how we do this. Everybody tells what they kind of think should happen. All right, so who wants to go first?
I'm happy to jump in. I think that it's most effective to depersonalize. And so I wouldn't necessarily, approach a facilitator saying, these are my views. I would say, a lot of people feel that all lives matter discounts the experiences of people of color and the oppression that they have experienced. Right. And so I wouldn't, even though I feel strongly, that that all lives matter is personally, is offensive. I wouldn't necessarily say that to Adam in this case. I would try to say, just present a generic perspective. Here's the other point of view, but really curious how others might approach this.
I find myself I have not run into anything as potentially conflicting in a group setting, but in a private practice setting, and you'll have clients who'll ask you directly, well, what do you think? Like, I agree that being able to depersonalize and just kind of present information that kind of expands their understanding. And like, I use a lot of phrases like, so how it's been explained to me is, or what this person said about it was this, and that kind of gave me an additional perspective, offering them enough information that if they are actually open to thinking about it and expanding their view, that they're able to consider that without feeling like I want them to be on one side or the other. The biggest thing I think for me in a group setting would be, especially just in the current climate right now, is I probably would start with a disclaimer just to say, like, this is one of those things that we all may very well have really strong feelings about, and we need to play nice. Like I don't tolerate screaming, yelling, cursing at each other in my space. This is a safe space, so keep that in mind.
That's great. Thanks.
Any other comments, thoughts? The
Yeah,
only thing- Go ahead, Hunter.
at our organization, we would call that a live grenade. And so it's your option if you want to pick up a live grenade or not, but you got to be prepared to deal with one if you do. So what we typically do is we use very diffusing phrases like, I hear you, and leave it at that, and then let the group deal with it. And so we're just there in case things start turning into personal attacks. If we see the group is getting divisive over this, then we step in. But I usually would use that as an opportunity to let the group talk it out and stop things from going in the gutter.
Okay.
I'll have to say from my perspective that when you're dealing with adults who are sober, these kinds of things don't typically come up. So I've never had an experience like this before with any of the people that I've dealt with in the family meetings. So
I have one little side thing that I want to throw in here. This kind of thing, oftentimes, because of the kind of disease, the nature of the disease we work with, this kind of thing can become an active part of the aberrant psychology. Like you said, it becomes, yes, I want to pick up a live grenade. That can be actually a part of the pathology. And I would look for that also in the process. Sometimes things like this are great reasons for me to say, I don't want to go to those stupid meetings you know, and those kind of things. So I would just say, as you're doing ethical things and working with the ethical sides of things, there's also always, is this playing a part in this individual or some manifestation in the group itself and in the disease itself? Yeah, and take a look and see if there's some opportunity or some responsibility to deal with. Any other comments or anything? All right. Well, I just wanted to know what y'all thought. No, about Black Lives. No, I don't. No, I don't. No, we're not going to share. We're not going to share any one way or the other. Next one.
I'll read it if you want to scroll down, Heidi. Okay, cool. So scenario 2, on Tuesday during your APG meeting, you noticed that Jake, a 17-year-old who had been regularly attending group meetings for about a month, had started to get more and more flirtatious with you in a way that felt uncomfortable and interfered with your ability to effectively run the group. You took time after the meeting and oriented him to the intended outcomes of his participation in APGs and re-explained your role as the group facilitator. However, when the Tuesday meeting came around, your conversation with him didn't seem to deter him or change his ongoing flirtation with you during the group meeting. At this point, what are some next steps that you could take to feel more comfortable about your interactions with Jake? Be specific about providing phrases that could be used to clarify your role within the relationship. How should you proceed with documenting this behavior? Should you discuss your concerns to anyone? If so, who? So lots of questions in that one.
Why don't we take it from the first one? What is it? What's the first one?
At this point, what are some next steps that you could take to feel more comfortable about your interactions with Jake?
Okay. All right. Floor is open.
I'm curious, is this something that's come up before for everybody else or anybody else that, no?
Hi, I'm Robin. So it does happen, especially with teenagers, you know, that like John would say, it's part of the aberrant psychology that goes on where they try to purposefully like hijack the facilitator by flirting with them. I've seen this in other people. And I think the important thing with someone like that is to not talk to them alone. You bring in another facilitator, you have a conversation and set some very clear boundaries about how you're going to go from there. Pull in the parents if you need to, because you don't know what's going on with that person. You know, why are they doing this? That's what I would do.
In planning, if you have the budget to handle it, it's a real good idea. One of the things you can do that's preventative is try, if you're pairing up for individual sessions of some type, peer or counseling or therapy or whatever, if you can do it and pair males with males and females with females, that helps some. You know, that's one of the preventative things. Sometimes it doesn't fit the needs of the therapy. Sometimes it's better to pair a male with a female or a female with a male. There may be something going on, but it's a thought to keep in mind as you're assigning, especially if you're in a large organization with a lot of choices. There are lots and lots of things that can pop up out of this, and it is a major issue. We did have a situation at the school where a new young lady at the school who was very new in recovery, in fact, probably wasn't sober, and was looking for a reason to get pulled out of the school, accused a facilitator of doing something. Luckily, they weren't alone and the other people who were there said that didn't happen. All right, so another issue thing, and so it worked out. Unfortunately, the parent did pull her though, you know, so she got what she was looking for, but it wasn't accurate. The thing that saved the situation for the counselor was that there were other people there when this incident supposedly took place. So that's another thing to kind of make sure that there are plenty of people around, maybe not, in the room, but no locked doors, easy for somebody to, if they feel threatened, to get away, so that you pull of those things. And this takes actually consciously thinking about it when you're doing it. You just have to think ahead on that kind of thing. You can have it. It's not only, by the way, from the clients. You can also have it from the family members. Family members will play some things out. Some of them are really hurting, and they're really looking for some sort of relationship, and at times we will seem like saviors to them, and they can really get involved, and you'll have to have some very serious conversations at times, and you have to be very careful how you approach things and make sure all of that's going on. Any other statement or questions on this next steps?
Well, John, I appreciate that you kind of addressed that transference is kind of a normal part of the helping process. And, and I do think that it's important to normalize with the youth, so just so that they don't feel ashamed of, how they might be feeling, or, or assume that they have negative intentions, but just to, to try to stay objective and reflect on yourself as an adolescent, right?
Last year.
Right. And so it's a normal part of the developmental process, I think, to have attractions to people. And so, in particular with the helping relationships, to project positive feelings onto someone who might be helping, participants feel better about themselves or take more control over their life. And so I think, trying to normalize that and set clear boundaries simultaneously, I think is really important.
Amen. Amen. What's the next question there?
Oh, hold on one sec.
Heidi, are you frozen or am I frozen?
No, sorry, I was trying to, I'm toggling back and forth taking notes. So the next question here is, be specific about providing phrases that could be used to clarify your role in the relationship. Anyone have any thoughts?
Yeah, this is Robin. I have seen the younger facilitators have an issue with this overlap because we get so intertwined with those families and with the kids. It's really important that that as staff members, that they continue to clarify their roles so that they can't be accused, right? And it's really easy to start playing favorites with people. So it's important for everybody to have continuing education about this issue. I know when I went to the training on peer recovery support specialists, half of it, every other word was don't have sex with the clients. Because some people do that, they're gonna, it's easy to fall into that. Shouldn't be, but it can be. And so I appreciate that particular question. So the roles need to be defined, as mentor, not friend, even though you act like a friend because you're playing with them and you're really in support meetings, you're hearing intimate things. So it's important to clarify that they're mentors. And I really, really highly suggest having two people in those meetings or at activities as much as possible. Like John said, if they're alone with them, it's really easy to get accused. And it does happen.
I like what you said about making sure that your role as the facilitator or mentor or clinician is really clearly defined. I have saved myself a whole lot of heartache and issue by explaining very clearly, first and foremost, that I have to maintain this specific relationship with you as your clinician with certain boundaries, because it's only within the context of this space that I can be helpful to you in this way, to kind of get their buy-in with that. But oh man, trying to facilitate a group of teenagers, to me at this point, I'm thinking, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's a thing you got to watch out for.
A specific phrase that I would use to clarify my role with my staff is, if you develop a personal relationship, you will be fired. That is a specific phrase that I have with the staff. And I mean personal sexual relationship. It is a policy, you know, in the program. You want to have a written policy. That's another way you protect the program itself, is make that very, very clear. Because it could happen. You can have somebody, and I won't say it hasn't happened over the years. It has. And we have had to let people go. Sometimes people who were very good at it. One of the things also I would be specific about is not only while they're an active client, for a period after they leave the program, it is the same. You may not develop a relationship with them for years. It's a big hunk, actually, maybe never. And that's
John,
something
can I
that
ask?
each organization has to decide. Yeah.
Sorry, can I ask what your policy is? I know this is something that we've talked about in New Hampshire, about after someone has left the APG, right? Do you put like 2 years or
Yes, you
2
named
years?
the number. Yes,
Yeah.
2
Okay.
years.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's 2 years. Yeah. Yeah. And we usually actually also put, and I say usually because sometimes there's exceptions for things, you know, and we're going to get down into this in a minute and talking about other people and, you know, to other people about things. But the exceptions bear a great deal of conversation before it's an exception. The 2-year thing is also pretty much what we adopt. We can't hire anybody back until they've been out doing other stuff for about 2 years, you know, that kind of thing. That has been generally the rule, and it's worked well for us. We haven't had anybody that maintain an unhealthy codependency or transference past 2 years with the organization itself.
In terms of giving, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Hannah. Sorry.
I was just going to say, in terms of like giving specific feedback as the facilitator to the youth, what are ways to approach that conversation that aren't going to feel like accusatory or like placing shame and blame, so that somebody doesn't feel comfortable attending the meetings anymore?
Waiting for feedback. Nobody talking in this one.
Yeah. We haven't had this exact scenario, but we've had situations where the behavior participant made them uncomfortable or felt like they may be judged if they came back. So we always kind of identify with them and say, look, if I was in your shoes, I would have done the exact same thing. So this isn't anything to be shameful of. This is just something to be aware of. The example I'm talking about is we have a little garden outside, and somebody came and stole like 50 watermelons from it and sold it for drugs. Was afraid to come back, and we're like, dude, trust me, if I was still using, I would have done the exact same thing. Please come back to me.
Except for the watermelon vigilantes that you don't know about, the hooded watermelon retribution squad. That's so funny. That's great. Other stuff, other things that.
So one thing that I wondered about is, you know, whether you, in talking with a youth, you might explain, you know, when you're clarifying your role, just explain, kind of blame the rules on the organization as well, right? To kind of back you up and say, you know, the policy here is that I can't have any personal relationship. You know, I could get in trouble or lose my job, and that's really important to me. And so I really need you to respect these boundaries.
Yep.
I think that's a great idea, especially with rules around maybe friending people on social media and things like that. That's an easy answer there.
Again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and making it clear throughout the organization that these are the rules, including the clientele, will, you know, that way you don't have to address an individual. You can just be addressing the group, saying, hey, everybody, just make you aware, these are the rules, and just go on, you know, that kind of thing. There's prevention in it, and maybe somebody there that's really been considering or attempting something that'll hear it and back off without feeling individualized, you know, those kind of things. Other ideas? Anything else on this one? Okay, next question. I'm gonna read it. If you'll highlight it. Yeah, I want mine in blue, by the way, because blue's my favorite color. How should you proceed with documenting this behavior?
So this is something that came to mind for us because our organization uses electronic health records when we do youth peer support. So every time there's any communication or any visit, the youth peer supporters are documenting it in our system. So in the instance that, so there was an example where one of the youth peer supporters went into someone's home to do a visit, and a little brother came up and hugged them. The little brother was like 4 or 5 years old. It was enough that we wanted to be able to document it in our system so that if anything were to come up, like later on, any accusations were made, like we were covered, we had exactly what happened, the day, the time. But in a situation like this, I don't know what the typical like notes are for APG meetings, if there is anything typical, or how people approach like incidents that come up.
I can tell you that I have seen everything in that over the years. I've seen no notes for the meetings, you know, except special notes when special things happen. I have seen only special things. That's the only time there are notes. And then I have seen things really annotated, just like you, just with the electronic thing on every meeting. In fact, I can tell you, because of some needs of the clients in the adult group right now, we're about to go to annotating every meeting. We have not been, but we're about to. Remember, we're building this group up, and it's new, and you move into things as you can and as the need has arisen. And it'll be done electronically. This particular behavior, this scenario though that we're looking at here, that would absolutely be, I would definitely make a note. I don't care, paper, somewhere there would be a note in the file specifically. And there would be a note on what was done, you know, specifically, et cetera. And it gets kind of to the next question, but I'll wait till we read it until we get into that, because it reflects.
I was taught that if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen.
Mm.
So to document everything.
Yeah. Yep. Hey, Janessa, it's good to see you. Did you eat lunch? Did you really?
I did.
Oh, what'd you have? What'd you have? I showed you mine. What'd you have?
I had a turkey sub. My mom brought it home for me.
Oh, man. Well, that's almost as good as a sausage, egg, and cheese sandwich. Did you have Velveeta cheese on it?
No, it came from Subway.
Oh, well, okay. All right. Any other comments on how should we proceed with documenting this behavior? Anybody else got an input on that? One of the things I want to point out, if you'll notice, there's some variation in this. You know, there's some people who are, you know, everything, some, all those kind of things. And there always is going to be some, but I think that the documentation is where really the rubber meets the road when there's something steps out like this. You really want to make absolutely sure it's there, you know. Next is, should you discuss your concerns to anyone, and if so, who?
As many people as ethically possible. If you have peers or colleagues outside the program, your supervisors or other licensed colleagues within the program, as many people as possible.
That's right. And Janessa, what was it that you said? You don't have to, well,
If you didn't write it down, it didn't happen.
that's right. So you discuss it and you write down the discussion. You make a note about the discussion. That's right. This is actually one of the most important things throughout all ethical process, is making sure that you're talking to other people about situations and making some sort of note that's happening. And not just this particular thing, it can be all sorts of things. And it can get a little muddy and a little messy and a little tiresome, but it's a really good idea to do it. Any other comments on scenario 2 and any of the questions?
John, I was just going to say that some of the best professional advice that I ever received was never worry about a situation or an individual in isolation, right? So kind of echoing Nancy's comment, right? Always seek out professional supervision, coaching, input from other coaches or APG facilitators on how to handle a situation. And then always consult the code of ethics that you follow. So for me, I'm a social worker, so I would consult the social work code of ethics, but, the peer support code of ethics, or whatever particular code of ethics guides your practice, I think, is just generally good advice.
Right. Anything else? Anybody else on this one? All right, scenario 3. Who's going to read this one?
I can read it again. I don't mind. I can only see half of it though, Heidi.
That she wants to know if you memorized it.
No, definitely not.
Absolutely not. Your photos were just over my scroll button.
Oh. So scenario 3 says, although you have been working with the same group of young people consistently for a few months through APG meetings that you facilitate in Nashua, which is a place in New Hampshire, today is the first day that you're all going out into the community together as a part of APG programming. About 10 minutes before the group is set to start, you're looking for a parking spot and you see Sean, one of the APG participants. You notice that Sean is walking in the opposite direction of the APG meetup location and down into an alleyway with someone you do not recognize. When Sean finally joins the group about 15 minutes later, the start time, about 15 minutes after the start time at the designated meeting spot, you can tell that something seems a bit off. Sean refuses to take his sunglasses off and isn't actively participating in group the way that he usually does. At this point, what are some next steps that you should take? Be specific about providing phrases that could be used in direct communication with Sean about what you've observed. How should you proceed with documenting this behavior? Who should you discuss your concerns with? And if so, who? Yeah. My reading was subpar on that one, guys. Sorry.
We want you to practice a little bit.
I need to.
I'm making a note. I'm going to talk to Nancy later about it. All right, guys, get ready, because this is going to happen 10 million times. Some version of this is going to happen over and over and over and over and over and over and over. So what you going to do?
With Heidi and I, sort of doing research and reaching out to APGs that exist, we've heard definitely a lot of differing practices on this. So I thought this one was particularly important because we've heard everywhere from like they do drug testing at the APG like clubhouse area to you know, a group that if the participant, even though they're sort of noticing that they might be using like and actively so in group, but aren't bothering anyone, they let them stay. So like we've heard a huge continuum of ways that this has potentially been dealt with.
Yep. Why do you think it varies from one place to another and one situation to another?
I think that people don't want to discourage people from attending the group, and they don't want to make a big deal about something that might not seem like a big deal in the moment, because that could save someone continuing coming to group. And then I think there's lots of liability issues that potentially could come up.
Yep. Yep. Bunches and bunches and bunches of them, both directions. This particular scenario is one that, as I said, it's going to happen over and over and over and over and over. You've got go to the client. You've got where are we in the treatment plan. You've got policies of the program, because in the old PDAP program, the 3 basic rules: don't come high, don't come holding, and no sex. Those were the rules. You didn't do that. That was it. There were 3 rules at the meetings and, and those kind of things. And so what do you do if somebody's high or somebody's holding, that kind of thing? Then you have situations, I can really remember this one really well. So I had a young adult client, and she told me that she had gotten loaded, and I made the choice to go ahead and work through it with her and with the counselors and everything. And her parents got very angry at me for not telling them that she had gotten loaded, because what I wanted her to do is her to tell them, and it worked out. It turned out that I think it was the right decision, but it was still a little slippery slope. What do you do? How do you do that? You've got confidentiality issues. You've got issues of if you don't say something and he conks over dead and you knew it, you're gonna have to live with that too, overdoses. So this is one you're going to see over and over and over and over again. The program is going to have guidelines probably on what to do with these kind of things, or at least assumptive guidelines, maybe not hardcore, but general direction guidelines. If it doesn't, you might want to bring it up with the organization itself. This particular scenario, what do I do? And those guidelines should also have things that you do as you're doing whatever it is. You know what I mean? They have elements in it about bringing in other people, talk to somebody else. What do you do with the family? Those kinds of things. Typically, I'll tell you in my history though, typically confronting use has never been a make it or break it type thing. Confronting use is always, for me, I'll almost always confront the use. I'll almost always, and then I'll write it down, and then I'll talk to somebody about it. That last scenario I talked about, if I do not want to have an overdose death in my office when I didn't say anything. I don't want that. I don't want it in my program either. And that is a real thing. I don't want a 3-year-old driven over by an 18-year-old as they leave the social activity. And I don't want that. So that's generally the programs I have run where we've gone with all of that, because it's really a bottom line to this disease. It's deadly to ourselves and to others. And so I'm pretty serious about that. Other comments?
So I think if you're one APG facilitator and you're a peer in age with the group that you're meeting with, you know, probably likely a little bit older, but how do you address the situation with somebody showing up like 10 minutes late? So you're already started the activity that you're doing. You don't want to derail the entire activity and the entire group. Yeah, I guess I'm a person who like catastrophizes everything. So I have lots of questions when it comes to like trying to figure out my role as supervising an APG facilitator. What should my expectations be of how they proceed in this, and how do I like support them to know the answers to the what ifs as much as possible?
You actually are going right back to what I said. It depends on where the program is in its development, what resources you have. In the best of scenarios, there's always 2 staff members available, but that always can't be possible. You know, that's not always possible. So I won't say that I have never put things off in pulling somebody aside and say, hey, dude, I think you're loaded, you know, while I got something else going. And I will say also, when somebody, you know, walks in late and it's obvious that they're nodding and stuff, that it might derail my plan for the night. So I adopt an alternative plan as quickly as possible so that I can pull them to the side and say, you know, hey, you need to, you know, you're loaded and we need to do something about it. We need to make a phone call because you're not safe, you know, to drive, etc., depending on the age and the situation. Again, one of the most important things is making sure you document it and get it down, you know, that kind of thing. This is a very difficult thing to deal with, frankly, at times, because of exactly what you're telling me. You have conflicting. This is why the very first thing I said is make sure that you have some conversations with your staff and get general policies with some elements of operation in them. I hope that helps. Guys,
It does.
it's 12 o'clock. We got 1 minute left and I got another meeting I got to go to in 1 minute. I love you. We'll do part 2 next week, if that's okay. Hannah and Heidi, is that all right?
That's great. Thank you so much for taking the time during today's session.
Oh, I love doing this. It's my best time of the day. I'm sorry that this is over. I got to go do things that aren't nearly as cool or fun. But that's okay. It's okay. It's all right. I love you guys. You're awesome. I'll try and get this out, the link to this out to you and everything. And I will see you next week. All right?
Thank you.
Thanks,
You're
everybody.
awesome. Love you guys. Onward through the fog.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.